Okay, well, I am being told that we're ready to go here. So welcome to Capital Classroom, and we're talking a little bit about politics and government, which are not necessarily the same things, but they're interconnected. We're coming to you from the Blue Press House on the Capitol campus in Olympia, which is about a block and a half from the Capitol Dome. It's a little strange because the picture of the Capitol Dome behind me, I am looking out of the window and seeing the actual Capitol, so I'm kind of sandwiched between two images of the Capitol. You guys are up in Bellingham, so I am hopeful that you've got enough questions to take us through this 30-minute session. So I will defer to the teacher there, and I don't know if he's picked up a series of students to ask questions, or you're just going to wing it. What do we got going?
We're going to wing it.
You're going to wing it. Hey, okay. See, that's why you needed a woman up front to take charge. Who's got a question?
So,
you in the red hat.
So we're talking about gerrymandering and redistricting, and we have like an independent commission in our state, and we're kind of wondering why more of the other states in our country don't use it, and how independent is it really?
Well, it's an interesting system that voters came up with in Washington State after a couple of years, decades actually, when it didn't work so well. That you probably have learned from studying that the states rearrange their legislative and congressional districts every 10 years after they get the census. So the census is done on a year that ends in a 0, and then the commission is put together in a year that ends in a 1. And there was one year back in the 60s where they couldn't come to a conclusion, so they actually didn't change the boundaries. But the reason that we do it is to equalize the districts so that we don't have them, in areas where the population is growing really fast. They aren't shorted because the districts that were drawn 20 years ago or 50 years ago don't represent that growth. So on the west side of the state, that's where almost all of the population growth is, and so those districts get redrawn a little bit more carefully than on the east side where the population growth is slower. The reason that some states prefer to do it the old way, which is you give it to the legislature and the legislature redraws it, is because those states are controlled by one party or the other, and that means the legislature is controlled by one party or another, and so they are able to continue to hold power by gerrymandering the numbers. Does anybody there know where the term gerrymander comes from?
I know.
All right. Where does it come from?
From Elbridge Gerry's drawing of the districts in the state of Massachusetts in 1796.
Correct. And did you know that Elbridge Gerry was one of the signers of the U.S. Constitution?
Yeah.
So he's actually a famous American patriot. He just kind of gets tarred with the term gerrymander because he was governor at the time. And so we've used that because one of the districts that they drew looked a little bit like a salamander. So we have the term gerrymander that has come down to us for over 200 years of politics. We do it with a commission that is appointed. It's a 4-member commission, and each of the main caucuses in the legislature gets to appoint a person. Democrats in the House, Republicans in the House. Democrats in the Senate, Republicans in the Senate. So that gives you 4 people. And they pick a chairman of the commission, or a chairwoman of the commission, as they did this most recent time. And then they redraw the lines. The way that we keep it from being overly partisan is that at least 3 people have to sign off on the lines that they draw. And then it goes to the legislature, which can either reject it outright or it can make minor changes. And I think the amount of changes that they can make is like 5%. So it's a pretty good system, but it's time consuming because there's a time, the 4 corners have to settle on the people that they're going to name to the commission, and then the commission has to pick its chairman. And then they have to sit down and start the process of looking at the maps and looking at the population numbers. So it's sort of like Winston Churchill's description of democracy, which is it's a terrible form of government except for all the others, which are so much worse. The way Washington State does it, it is a long and involved process. The other states that do it based solely on partisan politics, I think they're worse. One of the things that I think is going to help Washington State is that as computers make it easier to draw maps and look at data, I think it will work a little bit faster, and I think that's why we have the constitutional amendment on the ballot that to sort of move up the process, because one of the things that was a problem the last time was they took it right up to New Year's Eve to come up with the maps, and the legislature didn't have a lot of time to study it. Okay, next. By the way, feel free to ask follow-up questions if you have one, if something that I said just doesn't make any sense at all. Okay.
Okay, so we've also been learning about campaign finances, and Initiative 1464 is clearly an attempt to limit the influence of money. Mm-hmm. And we were just wondering, how is this initiative legal in the light of McCain versus Benning Gold and Citizens United? And any thoughts on if it's constitutional?
Well, I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on television, so I don't try to figure out whether something is constitutional or not. The guys running for the state Supreme Court, they could wax eloquent on this, I'm sure. But Washington State has limited contributions from individuals and organizations to candidates since the 1970s. This is an attempt to sort of refine that. But you're right, in the meantime, and very recently, the US Supreme Court has come down with Citizens United. So Citizens United does not directly address some of the things that the initiative is designed to limit, but there's almost no new law that somebody won't challenge, particularly a new law that comes from an initiative, because initiatives do not go through the vetting process that a bill that goes through the legislature does. Once you write an initiative and you file it and start gathering signatures on it, if somebody comes up and says, hey, wouldn't it be better if we did X rather than Y on that initiative? You can say, yeah, it might be better, but we can't change it. We're stuck with the initiative that we're gathering signatures on. I think that it can withstand most of the challenges to state law. I do not know if it will withstand any challenges to federal law as long as Citizens United stands. Now, there are also efforts to overturn Citizens United. That would most likely take an actual amendment to the US Constitution, and the process to get an amendment to the US Constitution is much more complicated, much more involved. So if the initiative passes, I would expect some challenges in state court, which I suspect that they can withstand. If they take it to federal court, I think all bets are off.
Do you know how well the initiative's doing?
I don't know. If I knew that question was coming up, I would have trolled the polling results. We haven't done a lot of polling in Washington State. Usually when we poll for a series of statewide issues and elective offices, it's because people want to know how things are going on in the presidential race. There's not as much suspense on the presidential race in Washington State as there is in, say, Ohio or Florida or Pennsylvania, where people are polling constantly. I think that that initiative, the last poll that I saw, which admittedly was, I think, in August, it was ahead, but I don't think it was over 50%. And the problem with polling with initiatives is you often get a very wide chunk of the people polled who say, I don't know. And as you project that into the actual election, the people who say, I don't know, when they mark their ballot, are more likely to vote no than to vote yes, because if they're not confident that this is a good thing, they are inclined to vote no because they don't want to take the chance that it'll make life worse for them. Now, that was much more true when we went to the polls to vote, which is admittedly more than a decade ago, when most of the state voted at the polling place rather than voting by mail. Because you vote by mail, and anybody in the room registered to vote? Did you get your ballot yet?
Yeah, filled it out yesterday.
Good. See, and if you didn't know something about a race or an initiative, what did you do?
Flipped through the voters pamphlet and Googled some stuff.
Good. Yeah, and that's what voters can do now, which they didn't used to be able to do when you went to the polling place. You know, if you went to the polling place to vote for the president, and oh my God, look at all of these things that are on the ballot. I don't know about this one. I don't know about that one. Sometimes people would leave them blank, and other times for initiatives they just vote no because they didn't know one way or the other on it. Now that we vote by mail, there are less chances that a person will vote no on something that they don't know or don't understand, because they will take the time to look it up so that they're not wasting their vote. So because of that, it's a little bit harder to predict the I don't knows and say, well, 2 out of 3 of them will vote no, or 4 out of 5 of them will vote no. I think on almost all of the initiatives, it's close. On a couple of them, I think they're going to fail rather badly. But the ones that are going to pass, they might pass with 4 or 5%.
All right, talking about voting by mail, do you think that has increased voter participation in our state?
Yeah, I think the statistics show that it has. But 2 things have increased voter participation. One is voting by mail, and one is the ease at which you can sign up to vote now. Back in the day, as we old people like to say, you used to have to go down to the elections office, which was either at City Hall or the county seat or someplace, and sign up to vote. You would show up with your driver's license. In some states, you would show up with your birth certificate to prove that you were first old enough to vote, because before 1972 you had to be 21. Now you do it when you're 18. You had to and prove that you lived where you said you lived and that you were a citizen. So it got so much easier to. Oh, somebody's phone's ringing. It got a lot easier to you can vote. You can register online up until about 2 weeks ago. Now you can still register to vote, by the way. You can, between now and next Monday, you can do it the old-fashioned way. You can go down to the elections office and you can fill out the form and sign up that way. But the ease of registration has has increased the number of people who are registered to vote. Vote by mail has increased the number of actual ballots that we get in, because people don't have to go to the polls. If they're working all day on election day, they might not have made it to the polls before they closed at 8 o'clock. So that's increased participation. But it is also true that turnout, which is sometimes derived as the number of people who vote divided by the number of people who are registered, has gone down. And I think that's because people who sign up this year to vote in the presidential election next year may not be as excited about voting. They may not have as many reasons to vote. So their ballot will come in the mail, and instead of filling it out when it first gets there, they'll set it aside, and it'll get buried under all of the junk mail and the catalogs and a bunch of other stuff. And then election day will come, and they'll wonder, hey, what did I do with my ballot? And they'll find it the day after the election, and it'll be no good. So because we make it so easy to register and so easy to vote, I don't think that people in non-presidential election years have as much impetus to vote. So there's good and bad, but on the whole, you'd rather have more people registered and you'd rather have more people voting.
We also looked at Initiative 1433 to raise the minimum wage, and we were just wondering how that's playing out in our state.
You know, I think it is playing out different ways in different places, because in some parts of the state, what the initiative would raise the minimum wage to is less than what the local ordinance or law on minimum wage would be. So in Seattle and in SeaTac, which was the first they're headed towards $15 an hour. The initiative is $13.50. It's not right away. It's done over time, and the increases one year to the next would be greater than the current law is to increase the minimum wage. But in other parts of the state, there has not been an effort to raise the local minimum wage for a couple of reasons. One is the employment levels in King County and Snohomish County, and to a certain extent in Pierce County, the unemployment is so low that there is a competition for good workers, people who will come in on time, will do the job that they're supposed to do, will stick with a company rather than quitting after they get a couple of paychecks. So there's the competition for good workers drives up the cost of wages actually faster than the minimum wage does. So minimum wage is a floor, and people looking for good workers will pay above that floor. In other parts of the state where unemployment is high, there are some counties in eastern Washington where unemployment is between 8 and 10%. The impetus to raise the minimum wage, it isn't so great, because there's a lot of people who are looking for work, and they would work for less than minimum wage if the law allowed them to. So I think in some parts of eastern Washington and some parts of southwestern Washington, it might be viewed as too much by some businesses. And so there's the tug between people who would like to be paid more and businesses who say I can't afford to pay more. So if this law passes, I will have to lay some people off. I won't be able to raise my prices in order to pay for this. I think that the initiative is ahead right now because Washington State has been favorable to initiatives that raise the minimum wage. Right? We adjust the minimum wage right now every year based on inflation because of an initiative that voters passed some years ago. And like I said, SeaTac and Seattle have ordinances that raise the minimum wage. I believe SeaTac was done by initiative. I think Seattle's was done by a city council directive to avoid an initiative, which might have been considered much faster of an increase in the minimum wage. So generally speaking, voters are favorable to raising the minimum wage. You need a really strong campaign by chambers of commerce, business groups that can prove why this would hurt the local economy and it's a local economy versus a state economy fight.
And then, what are your thoughts on the future of print of media and the transition to all online newspapers?
Oh, that's a really long discussion. When I taught journalism at college a few years ago, we'd spend a whole week on that mainly because these students were thinking of what should they do when they get out of college in the news media job. I think there will, as long as I'm alive, and probably as long as you're alive, there will be newspapers. For a couple of reasons. One is it's a really simple delivery system of news. It's not terribly expensive once you have the basics in place. Sure, printing presses are expensive, and newsprint is kind of expensive depending on when you buy it and where it's coming from. But it's a very portable way to carry the news around. But all newspapers are expanding into digital media. So the newspaper that I work for, which is in Spokane, it isn't just a newspaper that's delivered on the doorsteps every morning. It's also a website. It also delivers the news online several different ways. So you can sign up and pay a small fee, which is actually less than the subscription price to have your newspaper delivered on your front step. You can sign up for what we call the e-edition, which is a PDF of every page that is in this morning's newspaper, and then you can click on a story on the PDF, and you can get the full. Then you get that full story that you can read on your computer screen, on your tablet. You can also go to the website and call up any story that's on the home page. Now we have a paywall which allows you to only get so many stories a month before you have to subscribe. But recently they've decided to expand the number of stories you can get in a month before the paywall kicks in, just because they want more eyeballs. And that's the constant fight for all of the old style media dealing with digital media. Do you make the service free and then sell the number of people who are looking at your website to advertisers as, we can give you this many eyeballs over the course of 24 hours? Or do you charge a fee to sign up, and then you go to advertisers and say, we can target your ad to these particular subscribers because we know certain things about our subscribers. When they sign up, we ask them certain things about their preferences on purchases and where they shop, what they eat, that sort of thing. So we can target your ads to those subscribers. I'm not smart enough to tell you which is the way it's going to wind up being, because most newspapers go back and forth on this. And so I don't know how it's going to come out. I've watched my newspaper go back and forth between free and paywall several times. And we also had one of the earliest websites for a newspaper in the state. Our website was put together back in the early 90s, the first one. It's been changed a bunch of times since then. And about every time we get a new editor-in-chief, he or she decides that we've got to update the website, and it's got to look more like some website that he or she likes better. So it's a constant updating of the way a website looks and what it has on it and how we present things. But basically what I do is the same, whether I'm writing for print for the next day or for the web for right now is I have to get the information, I've got to understand it, and I've got to figure out a way to write it so that readers understand it. And there's a couple of tricks for writing to the web that are different from writing to the newspaper, but those don't enter into how I go about gathering the news and how I explain it, other than it does mean that I have a deadline right now all the time. Whereas with print, I have a deadline which is somewhere between 10 and 12 o'clock at night, depending on what day of the week it is. So we've got about 4.5 minutes left, so there should be one more question out there, right?
Question. I was wondering if an initiative like Initiative 735, do you see it as a waste of time, or do you think anything like that initiative would work?
Help me out here, because I don't know the initiatives as well by numbers, because I've gone through so many. 735, is that the carbon tax, or is that the?
It urges congressmen to push for an amendment to overthrow Citizens United.
Oh, okay. Because we have 732 and 735, and I can't keep them straight without checking. I think that 735 is an interesting idea, but I don't know that an initiative is the best way to convince your members of Congress to do anything, because it doesn't require them, it urges them. And it doesn't give them a specific amendment with specific language. It directs them to do something about Citizens United. But there are lots of different ideas on what to do with Citizens United. So it is possible that our congressional delegation could come up with something that a majority of the state wouldn't like. But I think the important thing about it is it shows that people either are or are not worried about Citizens United and the big effect of campaign contributions to the political process. We'll know this when we look at the results. And if there's a big push for this, what you might see is Congress deciding that it will take some action, because the constitutional amendment process, there's two ways to do it, but there's only one way that we've done it for most of the amendments, which is it starts in Congress, you get super majorities in Congress, it goes to the states, you get a majority of the states to agree to it. So if they could get the ball rolling with a particular amendment in Congress, I think that it would have a chance of being rewritten and overturning the Supreme Court ruling in Citizens United. But I'm not sure that there aren't other ways to do it besides a statewide initiative in Washington State urging our congressional delegation to do it. So I think what it shows really is the frustration that certain people have with the money that is being pumped into politics and campaigns right now, not just into the presidential race, but into all of the races all over the country. And Washington State is no example. I mean, we are spending millions on the governor's race, millions on the U.S. Senate race. There's a bunch of money being pumped into the state Supreme Court races right now. So that's unprecedented. So I think that at some point people are going to say enough on all of these big contributions. The question is, are we there yet? And that I can't tell you. We'll be able to look a little bit at the results of that initiative and sort of divine from the election results the views of the voters. But that's sort of an extrapolation in any case. So, and I think I just saw the teacher get up in the back. And I assume he's moving to the front, even though he's off camera because of the way everybody's looking around. Those of you who haven't nodded off there in the back, and I did see a couple of you yawn. Not a problem. It's relatively early for me, and it's you guys have probably not had a chance to have your triple lattes yet. So.
That's true.
Yeah. So I think we are out of time. A little beeper just went off in my ear. I don't know if it went off in the classroom too. So I want to thank you for tuning in, and this has been a lot of fun for us here to try and talk a little bit about politics and government with the next generation of citizens, which all of you are. Even if you're not registered to vote now, you will be in a year or so. So take it seriously, and study up for your elections, like better than some of you are studying up for your midterms. And it wouldn't hurt if you buy a newspaper every now and then too.
That's cool. Thank you.
That's all my
Thank you.
All right. See you later.